Hi, Jim here to help you out with some property management tips and techniques to help you from getting sued. When it comes to property management, if you haven't been sued, you haven't been doing this long enough or have enough business. I've been managing properties for over 20 years, and I'm going to share with you a lot of tips and techniques that will avoid lawsuits. So in the previous video, we spent a lot of time covering the importance of selecting the right client and the right property. Once that has all been done, you're satisfied that this is the correct owner and property to manage. You want to have a consistent approach to bringing your client on. There's a couple reasons why you want to have this process consistent. The number one is it will prevent you from making mistakes and skipping a key component. As you get older, like me, it becomes even more important. A checklist provides you with a way to make certain that you cover who pays what appliances are included, what the expected rent is, advertising, HOA docs, pets, and any extra costs that may be involved. There are different ways you can do your checklist. You can do it over the phone with a little piece of paper and just check off all the things that are important to you. I'm a little bit of a geek. I like to use Google Forms. Google Forms is actually fairly easy to use. I have an example there that you can test out. A quick tutorial offered by Google Forms will kind of lead you through how that works. I found it very simple. If you have any basic experience, any basic computer experience, you can do it yourself. And the beauty of it is I can send a link to a potential client and they can fill out that form using their cell phone or computer or whatever they have. And when they've completed that form, then I get a little email notification that the form is completed, and I can go through it before I issue a contract to the client. One of the most important questions I have on that checklist is what they are expecting in rent. I find that most clients are reasonable about what they expect on rent. They have already pulled it up on Zillow or they had it rented before at a certain price. So that's a common result. However, occasionally I do get a client that is completely unrealistic about the rent. And this is where we have a come to Jesus moment. I'll send them a link to the 5 consequences of having a property listed over market rent. And usually that brings them around. If they are unrealistic, I'll put it on the market initially and provide them with some marketing and advertising data to support the reason why having over market rent is going to work against them. I like to emphasize on that market rent page on the reason why vacant properties are a liability. They are prone to vandalism. I manage a lot of properties on the east side, and tweakers are always looking out for vacant properties. And the cost of the broken window, the door, the stolen appliances cost a lot of money to the owner. And in some cases, I've seen, not in my own personal example, but I have seen properties get burnt down. And you don't want to be in a position where one of your customers' properties gets burned down because they had their property listed over market. One of the most important methods for preventing lawsuits against you and the owner is to be certain that your owner is difficult to find. Tenants rely on attorneys who will be compensated on contingency fees. If the attorney has no way of finding the assets or serving the defendant, they are more likely not to take the tenant's case. So the owner of record is something that is a public record. If a tenant pulls up a property, it will indicate who the owner is and what the address is. So we want to make certain that the owner of record is not your current owner's home address. Nothing will piss off your owner's spouse than having a tenant pound on their door during supper. This is a very common problem. I would say probably 25-30% of my owners make this mistake. So listing the primary residence is a really big mistake. I had an example years ago where one of my owners listed his home in Washington as the owner of record, and he believed that since he lived in a different state, he wouldn't have a problem. Well, unfortunately, he did. The tenant harassed him, and it got so bad that he actually had a nervous breakdown. So, in your checklist, be certain that your owner isn't exposing their personal address on the owner of record. A key piece of your onboarding process is going to include marketing and advertising. And I give my owners an opportunity to tell me all the features that their property has. You want to be certain that the advertising that the owners provided you actually matches to the property. I'm actually currently in a lawsuit because the owner indicated that the front yard had lush green grass. And as you well know, here in Las Vegas, lush green grass and tenants don't belong together. That green grass died long before this tenant moved in. And this is a mistake that one of my property managers made. It wasn't me, but she had put in there that there was green grass. And so over time, that relationship soured. And one of the complaints that she filed with the real estate division was that she had false advertising. The reason why this lawsuit has not come about is because neither she or I have been properly served, but it's still out there lingering and still on the top of my brain. And it's not a legitimate complaint or lawsuit, but it is one nonetheless. So be certain that when you're doing your advertising, you are including what is current. Getting data or advertising propaganda copied and pasted into new platforms can get you in trouble. Another example is I had one of my owners nearly got sued because of a jacuzzi. It was an in-ground jacuzzi, and as you're aware, in-ground jacuzzis are difficult to repair or fix once they fail, and they do fail. And so the attorney came after my owner, and she was easy to find because her house was on public record, and the owner caved in because she didn't want to be sued. She did fix the jacuzzi. What you might consider doing is if you have a house that has a pool or jacuzzi, is in the description or in your lease, indicate that the jacuzzi is up to the tenant to maintain and repair. Because if it's an older property, I guarantee you that jacuzzi is going to fail. There are two other what I consider mechanical landmines that can blow up and become lawsuits. One of the most frequent failures is your ice and water dispensers in your refrigerators. If this refrigerator is on the second floor and or on a wood floor, these can create a tremendous amount of damage, especially if the tenant or the person below is vacant for a long period of time. Another one is not so frequent, but also a pain in the neck, is your water softeners. These often stop working and tenants never maintain them. So they eventually fail, stop working, and or start flooding the garage. At least you should put in the lease that these are not included. No matter which mechanical landmine you have, it's recommended that you disable them and make certain that you mention that in the lease agreement, and don't forget to include those issues in the advertising. I highly recommend that you send your owner a link to your advertising that includes everything from pricing to all the features of that property, because you want them to be certain that your information is correct. There's nothing more embarrassing than stating that the property has got a 4-bedroom when in fact it only has a 3-bedroom, or if it's got features that don't exist. So by having your owner bless your advertising, it's one more methodology or one more way to prevent you from getting in a lawsuit from a hostile tenant. One procedure you should consider doing is having your owners look at the advertising internally, either on your own website or a link to, say, an Excel spreadsheet, or if you're using something like Appfolio, a link to the property page. Have them look at that prior to putting on the MLS. It'll save you a lot of headache. I have narrowly escaped 3 lawsuits related to HOAs. One of my favorite one was at Las Vegas Country Club. Some of you may know that there are many rental restrictions there, as there's a certain percentage that can be rented, and my owner attempting to throw me under the bus by telling me that his unit was available for rent. It was shocking and disturbing when I got a phone call from the gate at Las Vegas Country Club that my tenant inside of a U-Haul couldn't get through the gate. So after I frantically called the HOA, I discovered that his particular unit was not available for rent. Thankfully, the tenant was really cool, had no problem turning around his truck and finding another place to live. I was so lucky I did not get sued by that tenant. I've had 2 other narrow escapes related to towing cars. And I think it's a recent phenomenon with HOAs. I'm not sure if it's just one more method for them to collect additional revenue, or they're getting more security conscious, or what, but in the last 2 years, we have had 2 cars towed because the tenants didn't get stickers for their cars. Of course, they go outside, discover the car's missing, and at first think their car's stolen, only to discover that the HOA towed it. In 2 of those occasions, we neglected to give the tenant the CC&Rs, or the rules for the HOA. So as you can imagine, it is a standard operating procedure now to make certain that every tenant who moves into a property with an HOA gets a copy of those rules. We use a methodology of Dropbox, using Dropbox, and so I do a short URL that links directly to that CC&R, and it's on that property record, so that when they do move in, I don't have to think about it. I just copy and paste that link and say, here's your rules and regulations. So be certain that you get all your rules and regulations for all your HOAs and pass those on to the tenant, because if their car is towed, they are going to sue you. We can't really talk about lawsuits without talking about property management agreements. Of course, the ultimate purpose of the property management agreement is to define fees, rates, and procedures. But we also need to include, of course, your start-stop dates, your monthly percentage, your commissions to agents, leasing and renewal fees, maintenance fees, eviction fees, that fee, and this fee. Also, you want to mention your inspections and recurring costs, appliances and utilities. You want to make certain that you define who is paying what. I sometimes get retarded owners that think that I got to pay their taxes in the mortgage. And then what can be super confusing in the metro area is we have 3 different municipalities in regards to trash and sewer. So I have to spell those things out. And even more confusing is there are some places in the north part of Las Vegas that are in the utility section of North Las Vegas. Super confusing. And we also insist, or I recommend that you insist that your property management company is additionally insured. We're going to go into detail about that later. We have mentioned this a couple times before, and we all know the real money in property management is the buying and selling of property. And the subject often comes up about buy and sell agreements. As you're aware, you can't require owners to use you to buy or sell properties. I have seen those clauses in some property management agreements. However, they are not legal. At the same time, you can also tell them that if a listing agent contacts you to list their property, you can always give them notice that you're no longer going to manage the property and that you're going to terminate the agreement. An example I had years ago is one of my multifamily owners attempted to have someone else list his property behind my back. I responded, hey, no problem. I'll give them the leases and the management agreements and let them take over. So, of course, the listing agreement did not have a property management permit, and so the owner was essentially tied to me. He gave me the listing agreement. I sold it, got a $15,000 commission, and that was happy days. If they don't hire you, you need to know what is wrong or what you did wrong. I had an example of one of my property managers did not get a listing for a property they managed. I called the owner and asked, why did my property manager not get the listing agreement? And he responded with, Jim, your property manager never gets back to me in a timely fashion. Now, the good news is the owner never bashed us on social media, and it wasn't egregious enough to turn us into the real estate division. But my property manager lost $10,000 commission because she was spending all her time on the wrong things. Termination clauses are a frequent item of discussion among property managers, and my opinion probably differs than most. And I'm going to share with you the top 5 reasons why I don't think you should hold clients hostage. Number 1 is they can file a division complaint. As you may know, a division complaint is more nerve-wracking than a lawsuit. Number 2 is there's a high probability they will sue you for negligence. For example, if you didn't get a tenant in a lengthy period of time or there was vandalism at the property. Number 3, they will slam you on social media, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Bad reviews live forever. Number 4 is they won't hire you to buy or sell property, which is kind of the whole reason why we're in the property management business to begin with. And number 5, the amount of emotional baggage is not worth the income. That pissed off owner is going to weigh on your conscience every night that you go to bed for the next 2 months. Let them go. If you want to charge clients for terminating a contract, make it modest, make it fair. And then when you do get terminated, transfer that account to another management company with speed and grace. There's enough business for all of us. There really is no reason to covet a hostile client. We're all pretty familiar with the newsletter that the real estate division publishes that puts all the naughty property managers in all their glory. And one thing I have discovered is there's kind of a huge correlation between their reviews, the number of bad reviews that they have, and the people that make it to that newsletter. So one thing that you may pay attention to is your own reviews. If you're getting a lot of bad reviews, it could be a lead indicator that you're in for a lawsuit. There are 2 major platforms that provide reviews to potential clients. One is Google reviews. I find the reviews to be non-biased, and Google does not sort them in terms of popularity or quality. Google just sorts reviews from a chronological order. Yelp, on the other hand, is quite the conspiracy. So if you have not signed up to Yelp, I would highly recommend that you never sign up to Yelp. Yelp is a lot like doing cocaine. Once you have given them money, you're done. If you don't keep giving them more money, they will put your bad reviews at the top. And I can demonstrate some of those examples where I've had a negative review back in 2017 that keeps being forced at the top of my review page, which really sets me off. So you should really highly consider not doing Yelp if you haven't already been sucked into that conspiracy. So let's discuss what happens when you have a customer who becomes naughty or difficult. In general, you should always be getting rid of your worst customers. One of the things I learned working for General Electric is they had a consistent methodology of getting rid of their worst customers, their worst vendors, and their worst employees. And coming from an employee's perspective, it got my attention because I didn't want to be the person that was at the bottom that got cut. And over time, owning multiple businesses, I discovered that that's actually a good policy to have across the board. You should always get rid of your worst customers. Every year, decide which ones you want to cut loose. You know who they are. They're the ones that constantly complain. They demand too much of your time. They have unreasonable requests. They get crazy and communicate directly with tenants, or what can be really awful if they become racist. I had a client last year that was a racist. I happily got rid of him. And then, of course, there are some types of properties that you might want to consider letting go of. Either they're too far away, or the margins are too thin, or the income that you're getting is too small. I walked the talk. In 2018, we decided to get rid of our portfolio of multifamily properties. It's probably one of the happiest days of my life when my last one sold in February. We're down to a couple now. We still have some multifamily that some of my property managers still manage, but I left it up to them to decide if they wanted to lose their sanity. I have a what I call a Dear John letter link here for you. So it gives you kind of a template that you can use to let go of a customer, and also kind of gives you some philosophies on how to do it. But at the end of the day, you just really don't want owners that don't like you. They have the resources to drag you into a lawsuit. And this is all about avoiding lawsuits. So in summary, in this video, we covered onboarding owners using checklists to be certain that you cover all the important details of a property, your procedures and policies. We talked about your property management agreements and why it's so important to include or not include a stiff termination clause. And ultimately, a way to avoid having difficult owners, either by letting them loose or cutting them loose. I really appreciate you watching this video, and we'll see you next time.